All right. So the question is, how do I get started doing digital missions? And so several questions come to mind. One, do you know who you're called to reach? Have you figured that out? Two, what is the Holy Spirit telling you to do? Three, there's things that I can ask to maybe spiritualize that, and the Holy Spirit and calling plays a definite part. But oftentimes we get stuck in doing that, where it's like I'm waiting from the voice of God to tell me what to do. And for some people, I'm going to be honest, the voice of God does give that clear direction. Um, for me, there have been seasons where God told me to do something. I felt comfort, I felt peace in that moment. But honestly, there have been times where it wasn't there. But I can tell you, there have been times where I leaned in. I started experimenting with different things, and in this context, even with digital mission work, um, we started and we started focusing on a different audience, and it wasn't the audience that I believe that God was calling us to, but it was definitely the audience that God was not calling us to. And so by starting in a direction, even though it ended up being the wrong direction, it gave us the clarity towards what the right direction was. And so how do you get started? Start. Connect with people, meet people, start streaming, start building a YouTube audience, lean into your social media accounts. Like, what is it that you are digitally collecting? What are the assets that you have at the follower level, at some of these connection level points, and start to build relationships and see if you can feed them into a community. Before you figure out what your discipleship process is, before you figure out how you're going to mobilize them, you got to build those relationships. And you can, it's the interesting thing with the church digital. We talk about this a lot. We actually pivoted our audience. We thought we were going to do one thing, and then we turned around and looked at the audience that we had, and it ended up that God was showing us not to do the thing that we wanted to do, but there was an opportunity to do something different. And so don't be afraid to get started, because in the process of getting started, you're going to find that God's going to speak to you, affirming or maybe redirecting in those moments. So lean in, take advantage of it, experiment. Don't be afraid of taking any wrong steps as you're building relationships with people at the connection level, at the social media level, and see if you can deepen those relationships by getting them involved in a community.